Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. I know it's been a really long time since we've all been together. Okay, just kidding. But I know we're all kind of overextended at the moment, and it's a stressful times. But we felt that it was very, very important for us to be here with you tonight to watch President Biden's remarks regarding today's, and I'm editorializing here, utterly egregious ruling about presidential immunity. There's unfortunately a lot at stake here. The stakes just got higher today. And much like last week, President Biden, the bar has been set very high for him. He has to assuage our fears. He has to make it clear that he and his campaign understand the stakes as well. Um, I sincerely hope they start to use Vice President Harris to explain what's going on to the American people, along with any other Democratic congressperson who also has insight into the kind of legal maneuverings that the Supreme Court leveraged to take another shot at American democracy and the concept that no man is above the law. That is no longer the case in America in 2024. So we're asking a lot of him tonight, and I am confident that he will deliver it. I just wish that there weren't so much writing on everything that's happening these days. It's a lot to take, but I'm glad we're here together. And we will continue to provide as much support and analysis. And here's the President of the United States.
Good evening. The presidency is the most powerful office in the world. It's an office that not only tests your judgment, perhaps even more importantly, it's an office that can test your character. Because you not only face moments when you need the courage to exercise the full power of the presidency, you also face moments where you need the wisdom to respect the limits of the power of the office of the presidency. This nation was founded on the principle that there are no kings in America. Each of us is equal before the law. No one is above the law, not even the President of the United States. With today's Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity, that fundamentally changed. For all practical purposes, today's decision almost certainly means that there are virtually no limits on what a president can do. This is a fundamentally new principle, and it's a dangerous precedent, because the power of the office will no longer be constrained by the law, even including the Supreme Court of the United States. The only limits will be self-imposed by the president alone. This decision today has continued the court's attack in recent years on a wide range of long-established legal principles in our nation, from gutting voting rights and civil rights, to taking away a woman's right to choose, to today's decision that undermines the rule of law of this nation. Nearly 4 years ago, my predecessor sent a violent mob to the U.S. Capitol to stop the peaceful transfer of power. We all saw it with our own eyes. We sat there and watched it happen that day. Attack on the police, the ransacking at the Capitol, a mob literally hunting down the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, gallows erected to hang the Vice President, Mike Pence. I think it's fair to say it's one of the darkest days in the history of America. Now the man who sent that mob to the U.S. Capitol is facing potential criminal conviction for what happened that day. And the American people deserve to have an answer in the courts before the upcoming election. The public has a right to know the answer about what happened on January 6th before they are asked to vote again this year. Now, because of today's decision, that is highly, highly unlikely. It's a terrible disservice to the people of this nation. So now the American people will have to do what the courts should have been willing to do, but will not. The American people have to render a judgment about Donald Trump's behavior. The American people must decide whether Donald Trump's assault on our democracy on January 6th makes him unfit for public office in the highest office in the land. The American people must decide if Trump's embrace of violence to preserve his power is acceptable. Perhaps most importantly, the American people must decide if they want to entrust the president once again, the presidency, to Donald Trump, now knowing he'll be even more emboldened to do whatever he pleases whenever he wants to do it. You know, at the outset of our nation, it was the character of George Washington, our first president, to define the presidency. He believed power was limited, not absolute. And that power always resides with the people, always. Now, over 200 years later, today's Supreme Court decision, once again, it'll depend on the character of the men and women who hold that presidency that are going to define the limits of the power of the presidency, because the law will no longer do it. I know I will respect the limits of the presidential powers I have for 3.5 years, but any president, including Donald Trump, will now be free to ignore the law. I concur with Justice Sotomayor's dissent today. Here's what she said. She said, in every use of official power, the president is now a king above the law. With fear for our democracy, I dissent. End of quote. So should the American people dissent. I dissent. May God bless you all. And may God help preserve our democracy. Thank you. May God protect our troops.
Did we expect him to answer our question? I didn't. I would have liked to have seen that made from the Oval Office, but it was a very nice, very well done.
You know, when you're so anxious about something and you know, you're trying not to think about how anxious you are, and then the thing you're anxious about happens and it goes better than you thought it might, and you're suddenly relieved and you want to faint. That's kind of how I feel at the moment, because you know, I obviously I want to hear what you guys have to say, but we can talk about how maybe this didn't go far enough, how we might have wanted to hear more about Biden was going to do with his new powers as an emperor, uh, and maybe some glimpse into, I don't know, an understanding that there aren't rules anymore, that there is no president, quote unquote, limit on presidential power to respect. However, this is day one. I can only imagine how we know how difficult it is for us to process it. I can only imagine how difficult it is for the Biden administration and the Biden campaign to process this. Like, what do you do with this information, knowing that if you wield this power, you too might, well, in the service of trying to save American democracy, destroy it. You know, it's a quite fine line they must walk. What I will say before handing it off to you two is I am relieved. President Biden spoke forthrightly. He spoke clearly. He checked off quite a few boxes that needed to be checked off in terms of reassuring the American people that he understands what the Supreme Court did today. He understands the crimes Donald Trump has committed against this country. He understands his role. And I think we need to give them a bit of space, especially given just the fucking insane backlash to last Thursday and what they must have been dealing with for the last 4 days. A little bit of space to figure out how best to proceed. We are in completely uncharted territory here. So I think it's fair for them to take a bit of time to figure things out. However, tonight needed to happen, and it's other than, maybe fulfilling our fantasy that Biden was going to say, okay, then I'm going to add 5 seats to the Supreme Court tonight, which I think was asking a bit too much. I think it's a very, very good start. Jen?
Yeah. I think, the feelings come first. Hey, Danielle. The feelings come first, which is a sense of relief. I'm glad in terms of format and substance, he kept it short, concise, and to the point. I'm offended by the first question and only question that someone shouted at him. I'm sure did you hear it?
I did not hear it, actually.
The reporter said as he was done and turning, are you going to like drop out of the race? It's like, okay, you've lost the plot. Okay, but let me go back to the content of what he said. I'm very pleased that he hit the right notes. Him saying, I dissent, and aligning himself with Sonia Sotomayor, his, discussion about no one being above the law, his, expression that this has robbed the American people of seeing a trial before. I want to put a pin in that, though, because I hate that expression. Erase that. Fix that and post, Kyle.
Yes, we're going to fix it.
So the important thing, though, is, we've been, my friend Katie Fang this morning and others now on MSNBC have suggested that Chutkan might, but now actually must immediately hold an evidentiary hearing. And given what the Supreme Court has done, she now needs to have every witness at this hearing because she now needs to actually decide whether this was an official act. And the only thing that cannot be discussed would be any conversations he had with the acting attorney general, because remember, that's this little tricky part of the decision where you can't use as evidence anything that is right where the president is at least apparently using, cloaking his behavior in his official Article 2 acts. Let me translate that into human speak. We will probably shortly begin seeing, maybe in August and September, or maybe I don't know when, but we're going to see an evidentiary hearing soon, maybe September and October, if she has the guts, and she should, Judge Tanya Chutkan, to hold that hearing immediately. And that is not great for Donald Trump. So that was my first thing. And I guess my second thing is responding to what you said, Mary, is like, how are people reacting? The head of the campaign was quoted as being scared by this decision. And we all should be. There's only kind of one time in my life when I had the kind of full body chills that I did today. And it was right after the financial crisis of 2008. And I immediately...
mine was Bush v. Gore. But okay.
But it was then, and I remember thinking, oh my God, I know when that collapse happened and we weren't able to rescue the millions of homeowners who were losing their homes and families. I had this feeling that this is how we get authoritarianism and fascism, and I just felt it. And there was like this bookends for me today with like, oh my God, this is where we are, And I think we get out of this. I think in a way this case is a miracle because now it's the worst thing in the world, but now people need to face up to what this office entitles someone to, and we cannot put Donald Trump back in this office.
Yeah. A couple things. I do want to get back to the trial and the impact on the trial and the importance of Judge Chutkan moving forward with an evidentiary hearing. I haven't had a chance to read the whole majority opinion or just the dissents, but from what I'm gathering, it's like, yeah, because he talked to an attorney general about stealing the election with fake electors, that's an official act. And I mean, it's really bad. It's really, really, really bad. But we'll talk about that in a bit. But Brian, I want your reaction to what President Biden had to say. But I also want to keep in mind the context here of using, as Jen just pointed out, using this as an opportunity to reveal just what a corrupt decision this is. And also, if I were Judge Chutkan and that appeals court, I would be so angry that nothing would stop me from getting the truth out.
Well, I talked to several. Ted Boutros was one that I talked to today, and he said it was a frightening in its scope, and it in effect overturns U.S. versus Nixon. So that's today with those tapes.
Brian, I'm sorry. I didn't hear the name of the person you spoke to.
Oh, Ted Boutros, the First Amendment.
Ted, yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And he was saying that, and he said that basically, U.S. versus Nixon is overturned by this. So you would not be able to subpoena and get those tapes today. That's frightening in its scope. What I took out of the president's speech tonight was he's not going to abuse his powers. He respects the Constitution, and he's inflamed and angry with those people that are, Donald Trump and the ilk that aren't. My question, and I think that went about as far as you could go on day one. I don't think you could say much more today. I've just read through. It took me several hours to go through the Supreme Court ruling and the dissent, and that's a tough one. But what it boils down to, reading through it angered me because there was such a misrepresentation of facts and a misrepresentation of the Constitution. To the idea that the president of the United States is above the law, I remember and this was a question we asked often in the Trump White House, and I remember getting the same answer. Does the president think he's above the law? And every press secretary I asked that of, and the president himself said no. Obviously, they are. And it's frightening. It is. But here's bottom line, Mary. I always try to have hope. But I look into the eyes of a 5-year-old grandson, and I realize that the world that I grew up in no longer exists. And the future is, if we don't do something about it, the future is Handmaid's Tale. And that's not something I really want to contemplate, after 63 years on this planet, trying to fight for what I thought was democracy, to find out that basically 6 Supreme Court members who are members of a far-right Catholic cult and have been instructed by a far-right Catholic cult are the ones who are deciding for the rest of us how we should live. And as a Catholic, I'm ashamed. As a member of the United States, as a citizen of this country, I'm appalled. And I know there are people going, well, it's okay because it's only official act, so we'll be able to prosecute him. Reading this, let me tell you something, folks. You can decide that anything is an official act if you're the president. According to this ruling, anything the president says is an official act is an official act. It's what Nixon said. It's not against the law if the president does it. And the Supreme Court sided with Richard Milhouse Nixon today.
Yeah, and they left it purposely vague for that very reason. As I was reading through it, it's like, what does this mean? Like, what exactly is that or that or that? And they never tell us, and that's purposeful and intentional. So Danielle, I want to get your thoughts, but I also just want to remind everybody that much like with Roe v. Wade during their confirmations, during which they said Roe v. Wade is settled law and precedent, we're seeing clips of John Roberts, Samuel Alito, etc., saying no one is above the law in America. The president is not above the law. So, Danielle, what are the chances you think that somebody is going to drag these people in for committing perjury and impeach them, for God's sakes? Because I don't know what else we're going to do. I really don't.
I always come on here and I joke and say that I am ye of little faith and carry around a mustard seed of hope. I think that is dust today.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that there isn't. I haven't felt this way, which I had to pull myself together to even come on air with you all, because since the decision came down, like many people across this country, I've actually been terrified and in tears. I'm a Black queer woman, child of immigrants, who has spent and built a career on being extraordinarily vocal about the United States of America and it living up to its creed. And now I realize that there is like nothing but documentation that could get me thrown out of this country, even though I'm a US citizen, that could, I don't know, destroy whatever future it is that any of us have as, you know, as those that try and bring truth to power. It is, the fact is, and I want people to really understand, and I think that Biden did a really good job because it didn't need to be long. What he needed to offer, he needed to say very starkly and very clearly that this office in the hands of the wrong person is now a weapon. The presidency is a weapon. That is what the Supreme Court has given. And there is no one who will look at that absolute immunity and say to themselves, well, you know, I'm going to take the high road. Like if your character, this is what, you know, and Obama had said this once too, which is that, you know, the presidency, the office of the presidency doesn't change who you are. It reveals who you are. Right. And it revealed to us exactly who Donald Trump was, who he surrounded himself with, what his intentions were. Remember, folks, like, you know, after the killing of George Floyd, there were protests that were happening in front, in Lafayette Square, in front of the White House, with General Milley in his armed fatigues. Donald Trump said, "Can't we just shoot them?" And Milley said in his book, because of course he waited for that to go on fucking sale. He said that would be illegal. We can't do that because there's this thing called the Constitution. Well, let's just fast forward, folks. Like, if in fact there are protests, if Donald Trump is elected and there are protests in response to that, Donald Trump can unleash the military, take captives in the way that the Chinese have done, in the way that Iran has done, right? In the way that, yes, as Putin has done and continues to do. All of a sudden, our political leaders will begin to fall ill or fall out of fucking windows. And this is no longer hyperbolic because if you are deemed to be an enemy of the state by Trump 2.0, any action taken against you will be an official act.
Yeah.
And I mean, let's be really clear about this. By the way, just you reminded me of an article that Elie Mystal wrote for The Nation entitled, "The President Can Now Assassinate You." Officially. Yes. So let's be very, very clear here. I mean, they've been chipping away at it for a while. But what the Supreme Court, the supermajority, the illegitimate supermajority of the Supreme Court did today, and let's not forget they are illegitimate and corrupt and partisan and reactionary and Christian nationalist. What they did today was render the Constitution useless. The Constitution is no longer worth the paper it's written on. The Supreme Court of the United States did that. The Supreme Court, which is supposed to uphold the Constitution, rendered it meaningless. So in service to Donald Trump. Jen?
And what's so hard about this is if you want to be an institutionalist, you don't say what I say now, which is, okay, so they grabbed the power of judicial review. For that means that they decided in this old case called Marbury versus Madison, yes, Madison, James Madison, founder. They decided in that super old case that I think, Brian, you might have been around. It was the Reagan era, right? I'm kidding. So in that very old case, they decided, hey, we have the last say. They decided that. And we have acted like that's super cool. So if I weren't to, one thing to say is like, well, fuck them. Like, but you can't, the reality is they actually have the power and, we don't want to blow up the judiciary. Similarly, I think Biden is in a bind because he has more power now. And I'm not talking about assassinating people with the Navy SEALs, but I'm talking he's got all kinds of other powers he could get away with. And he now needs to use the fact that he has honor, character, and would show restraint in order to distinguish what it would mean to elect a Democrat versus elect Donald Trump. However, of course, after the election, I don't know. This is, Mary started out by saying this is uncharted territory. I could say the lyrics to the REM song, for those Gen Xers, it's the end of the world as we know it, but I don't feel fine. I'm trying to piece it all together. And, there is a before and there is an after. And we are now sort of on the, in the middle. It hasn't fully sunk in what this means, but I think I said it on my Substack and I said it in our Emergency Nerds this morning. July 4th was is supposed to be Independence Day, but now we have July 1, which is Coronation Day.
Yeah. Well, not yet, but we'll see. I'm hoping that Team Biden explores every avenue to create some kind of counterbalance to this before the election, because I think it will demonstrate to people that he's fighting, and I think he demonstrated tonight that he understands the danger. He understands just how insane this is. And he reminded people who may have forgotten because of, corporate media spin and Republican spin, that January 6th was actually something that happened, and it was terrible and it was dangerous and it was an absolute threat to our country, in which violence happened, and worse violence was planned for, not just threatened, but planned for.
It never ended.
No, it never. That's
January
it wasn't a
6th
dress rehearsal. It was the beginning of a coup that's ongoing. The coup hasn't ended.
Act 1.
Yeah, no, and we saw an act today out of the Supreme Court who has abandoned constitutional principles, and I would love it if they take a good, hard, long look at the powers that they've been given as president by the Supreme Court and take action against the Supreme Court. Because, it was Andrew Jackson who said, great, the Supreme Court made a decision. How are they going to enforce it? I've got the army. Well, I hate to be that guy, but at the end of the day, if you're not going to enforce, what are you going to do? If you're not going to enforce democracy, what are the alternatives? What does the president have within him in the next 6 months to do about the situation? I would love to see at least some congressional move made to limit. Look, no one is above the law is the very basis of our government. It is the rock principle behind it, and they abandoned it.
Yeah. Has anybody woken Dick Durbin up? I'm just checking. Do we know? Is he awake? Because I think this is permission to stop bugging around. If I were in the judiciary,
pull an Abe Lincoln.
I would subpoena every single one of these 6 justices. And if they don't show up, I would send the sergeant at arms to go get them, because this is absurd. This is absurd.
Send the military.
Send whomever. We need. Danielle, if you could talk a little bit about your very uplifting tweet, that would be awesome.
Because I'm just, I'm looking for anything, folks. And I'm just like, oh, fuck, every time I go on the internet. So somebody, Vince Meeples, had tweeted about 8 hours ago.
Hey, Vince.
And then I had to look it up, and I was like, oh, so this is real. So March 1933, the Enabling Act becomes a law in Germany, giving the chief executive power to enforce his own laws without checks and balances. The passing of the act marked the formal transition from democratic republic to totalitarian dictatorship. 6 months later, it was a one-party state. That's the tweet. And just FYI, we don't even have 6 months. We have less time than that until the election. And the fact is, I am the bearer of I question that I have, to all of you is that I'm not, I've been wondering all day, has the election already been decided? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, there is nothing that Donald Trump, that his followers, that the Supreme Court, that the Heritage Foundation, that these billionaires will not do now to secure, like, the Supreme Court's decision is catnip for criminals. And so there's a part of me that is just like, are we
Billionaire
already at the dress rehearsal? Do you know what I'm like?
Yeah.
Like, are we just, is it already done? Because honestly, y'all, I don't have faith in the American people right now. I really don't.
Well, I mean, which is fair, I think. But what I would say about that is that, yes, this raises the incentive for the other side to cheat and make sure that they win. But it also raises the stakes for us. So, and by the way, it doesn't confer anything on Donald Trump now except sort of retroactive immunity. So, in other words, there's nothing he can do right now. Like, he doesn't have any more power right now. We already knew that he was getting away with this stuff. Like, in my view, this doesn't change anything in terms of Donald's cases because they weren't going to happen anyway, because of Aileen Cannon, because of the court. Like, even if the court had come down today and said, no, of course it's absurd, there's no such thing as presidential immunity, this case still would not have happened because it's too late. And that was their first goal. And then they realized, oh my God, we've gotten away with everything, so we can take it another step. I think that it's a reasonable thing to worry about, though, that's for sure. But that's all the more reason for us, knowing what is at stake for us. I mean, just personally, what's potentially at stake for us.
What's at stake for the country?
But also personally. I mean, we're in the trenches here.
Yeah.
And we've all got targets on our backs. And that is something that I mean, we can't forget that, right? So it is a little bit. Let me just finish. Okay. It's reasonable to be concerned that not just the fate of the country, but our own personal fates are at the mercy of the American people being informed enough to know what's going on and what could happen here if they don't get their acts together. And by the way, not just vote, but vote in such numbers that we can overcome the institutional disadvantages Democrats have, gerrymandering, all that other stuff, right? So it's reasonable to be worried about all of that. I am not yet, like, I don't want to concede too much just yet. And I think part of the reason, Danielle, and I mean, I'm not dismissing your feelings at all, because I share them to some degree. But I think part of it too, like, I had a very, very bad moment earlier today, and I had to, like, give myself, I'm still having a bad moment, quite honestly. But I had to just remind myself how exhausted I am and how stressful the last week has been, and hope that with some rest and tiny little bit of distance, tomorrow will be a little less fraught, right? It's very difficult in the midst of the churn to be objective. I can't be objective right now. And I'm 6 hours out of not feeling hopeful at all. So I'm a little bit more towards the hope end of things, but still, it's going to be a struggle. And I don't think we should delude ourselves that there's no reason to be worried. There are plenty of reasons to be worried. But Brian, I think that as tempting as it is, not because it's preferable, but because we're not idiots and things keep going against us, right? And to me personally, like, that might be one of the hardest things that Donald Trump, who's the worst person I've ever known in my life and who has caused me and my family horrific harm for my entire life, keeps getting away with shit. It's unbearable. However, to cede anything now is to let it to say, okay, it's always going to happen. I'm not willing to give up my power yet, and or sorry, I'm not, because who knows? I'm not willing to give up my belief that our power is still valid and is still is going to get us where we need to be. I believe in us, and that's what I need to continue to believe.
Well, to give you some hope, then Jamie Raskin sent out a press release regarding this recently, as a couple hours ago, and spoke to how horrible it was and that there needs to be some congressional action. I have heard from Republicans who are also upset with this, not as many as Democrats, but perhaps enough to get legislation.
Are they going to say it? Are they going to say it publicly? Because if they're not going to say it publicly, I don't care.
What kind of legislation, Brian?
What more importantly,
expanding the court?
Yeah. What more important? Well, more importantly, it's not what they say publicly; it's what they do publicly. I mean, because I've heard politicians say a lot and do little. So I would like to see, and Jamie has the right words, but let's see where it goes after that. There are huge problems that, Jen, are they going to expand the court? Are they going to write legislation that holds the president accountable? That seems to me you would have to go into the Constitution to address. So you're looking at, this is probably the biggest kerfuffle, definitely of our lifetimes. But it is the deciding point by which, and look, let's not mince words either. This didn't occur, out of the ether. Remember, during the Bush era, they bailed the big banks out. They have notoriously, consistently protected their own asses while skirting the law and drilling it into us. And there is nothing more reprehensible than the bold action that they've taken, but they've been able to take this bold action because for years they screwed us on the sly and told us to smile while we got it, folks. So now they're coming out and going, you know what? We got enough power. We don't really care whether you like it or not. Here's Project 2025. We're going to send you back to the Middle Ages. Oh, and by the way, you know what? The Constitution, that was okay back then. But what we need now is what Hitler had in 1933. I'm sick to death of the fact that people are ignoring it. It's at some point in time, if you take no action, and this is the time to take action. If you don't act now, you deserve what you get. This is that Revolutionary War moment when somebody's got to ride through the countryside screaming, the British are coming. In this case, we got to run through the countryside going, the bankers and Donald Trump are coming, protect everyone. You've got to do something about it.
America is an oligarchy. And I want to say something that makes something very clear. Danielle, you said you're worried that that you believe that the Constitution will be suspended. It has been. Okay.
Yes.
Now, I think the analysis, a lot of the analysis is that the president specifically Donald Trump has been made king, right? And I disagree. What has happened is that the Supreme Court justices have made themselves emperors and given themselves the power to confer on whomever they wish similar but not equal power. They are the kingmakers, and what are kingmakers are more powerful than kings. That's what the Supreme Court has done. They will not extend such grace to President Biden. They will save it for the next Republican president, which again is why we need to make sure that never happens. And also, maybe, hopefully, Kyle has been talking about this all day. If we don't address income inequality in this country, it's not going to matter anyway. Because again, we're an oligarchy. And we're an oligarchy and a monarchy. And that's untenable. So we still have We still have time, but it means being utterly serious about what is required of us and everybody else.
I mean, I think that to Brian's point, I think that what is required, and I said this earlier as well, on here, which is that people need to get into the streets. Like, this cannot stand. Like, I think that people have got to understand. I don't know what it is about the complacency of Americans. In France, they had threatened to raise the age of retirement, and they nearly burnt the entire city of Paris down. So, like, I am saying here very unequivocally, people need to get into the fucking streets and, like, stop with the bullshit around, like, Biden's age. I don't give a fuck, right? And no one else should. What we need to understand is that there is not a Republican that exists on this planet that will not abuse the office of the presidency. And whether it is in 2025 or 2028 or 2032, it does not matter, because Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation, has laid out the blueprint, and all they are looking for are willing and able puppets, right? And let me tell you something, power is seductive, right? It is seductive to the best of people. So the fact is, I agree with Brian that, look, this president, this current occupant of the White House, needs to be sitting down in the war room with a team of fucking constitutional lawyers and saying, so now that the Supreme Court has decided this, what do we need? Because did you hear him at the end of his speech? I have never heard a president of the United States say, God bless and preserve the democracy of this country. I'm paraphrasing, but that's exactly what the fuck he said. He said, God bless our troops and God bless and preserve our democracy. So if Biden is not in a war room sitting with a team of lawyers that is figuring out what is within the scope, which apparently is every fucking thing that can be done over the next 4.5 months, then, like, I don't know, because what we have been given right now is a gun, and we are playing Russian roulette with this fucking election with a unreliable voting body of Americans who couldn't stomach a fucking woman. And that's why we're here right now, because Hillary Clinton's emails, right? You couldn't get over it. And we could have had a 6-3 court in our fucking favor right now and have restored and expanded rights. And now we're hanging on life support.
All right. So just to, I want to address what you just said, because one, I couldn't agree with you more. Two, that is the essential issue we're talking about. But I want to take a second to inform everybody that the dominoes have already started falling. Donald,
They're down, baby.
the traitor, Donald Trump, the criminal, Donald Trump, the rapist, Donald Trump, has begun to think about that. He's all of those things. He's the Republican nominee for the president of the fucking United States of America. Donald Trump has begun an effort to throw out his recent criminal conviction in Manhattan and postpone his upcoming sentencing in the trial in which he was already found guilty of 34 criminal charges, citing the new Supreme Court ruling that granted him broad immunity from prosecution for official acts he took as a president, according to person with knowledge of the matter. Okay, that's what we're talking about here.
Yes, and I just want to add a few things about this. One, fully predictable because it gives him a talking point. Two, if the Supreme Court doesn't wait, they're fucked. This is bullshit. Remember how they decided they couldn't, they can't take the case in theory until it goes all the way up. The sentence would first have to be appealed.
What, you think
through the
care?
New York
Do you think
court
they
system?
Care?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, but even if they don't yet take it, they could do something like put it on hold, even though the judge already put it on hold. This is fully a gift for the optics, and the Supreme Court is. One last thing. They could have released this decision before the debate and it would have changed everything. The whole debate prep would have changed. There's so much I have to
Everything
say
they've done,
about that. Yeah.
everything they've done has been political maneuvering and hackery.
You know why?
they could
Because
have
they believe they can take whatever power they told us when they did this power grab, Mary, sorry to cut you off. Their view is if you can't stop us, we'll do whatever we want.
I mean, that's in Donald Trump's whole life, and the Supreme Court got a taste of that, and that's why we're here, because nobody is stopping them, and they could have been stopped. So, okay, let's just take a breath for a second. I'm so angry. I'm not entirely sure how long I can sustain the levels of rage that course through my body on a daily basis. I mean, the injustice of all of this is just it's just so yeah, I agree with Danielle that there needs to be a war room set up around this, and they need to come up with something. And I'm not talking about violence. I'm not talking about doing the kinds of things Donald would do. I'm talking about coming up with strategies that force the Supreme Court's hand and that demonstrate to the American people what we're talking about here. Okay? What we are talking about. We're talking about the destruction of this country, the destruction of our future, our children's futures, because think about it. Project 2025 goes into effect. Women are second-class citizens. They can't have birth control. There's no longer no fault divorce. If you're pregnant, you will not be allowed to get divorced, let alone travel across state lines, let alone have an abortion. If you're raped, if you're a child, incest, it's open season on young girls to be raped by anybody and not be able to get abortions. The LGBTQ plus community will be outlawed. Immigrants will be deported or put in camps. And we will never address
This is
climate
Project
change.
2025, just to be clear, right? It's in their plan.
I said that, yes.
I'm just repeating it for
yes.
people so they know you're not wishing this on us. This is their plan.
No, I'm saying this is what is going to happen if Donald gets back into office. The civil service will be disbanded, and civil servants run this country. They are, generally speaking, apolitical people who just want to serve their governments. All of those people will be dismissed and replaced with sycophants who have to pass loyalty oaths, which is very Nazi of them. And we will never, not only will we not address climate change, the end of humanity, which sounds hyperbolic, will be accelerated because not only will we do nothing about climate change, we're going to make it worse. Okay. And that's just scratching the surface of what's going to happen. There will be no more public education. There will be no post office. There will be no EPA. So clean water. I mean, the Supreme Court already basically said, you want clean water? Fuck you. Go live somewhere else. You want clean air? Not our problem. Because it's more important to us that billionaires get richer. Okay. This is it. This will be it. This will be game over. And there won't be another opportunity here. Okay. I think that part of the problem in 2021, when President Biden became president, was that we were in such a deep hole because of the economic crisis, because of the COVID crisis, and because of the democracy crisis, that so much effort and so many resources had to be expended just getting us out of that hole that we did not have. And we were all just so traumatized, like we couldn't deal with it. Like we just wanted things to be okay again. And we failed to recognize that things were not okay. And we needed to keep fighting that fight. And we didn't, and we couldn't. And here we are. So there will be no second chances here because the clock is ticking, and it's almost time is almost up. I've heard people say, well, it takes a few decades for democracies to recover. No, we don't have a few decades because we're time limited by climate change, for God's sakes. And by the way, even if we weren't, do you seriously want the next several generations of our children to be, forced to have children, to be impoverished, to have no rights, to be ruled by a government that sees them as fodder, I mean, is that really it? Oh, well, we'll
We
get
already
democracy
do.
back. I understand that, but it's going to be that way for everybody. So, I think maybe if we recognize that it already is like that for a significant for significant segments of our population, maybe we would be a little bit more sensitive to the realities. I mean, if you think about not just maternal mortality, but maternal mortality among Black women in this country, it is a crime, and it's never addressed. It is an absolute crime what is done to trans women in particular, trans women of color in particular in this country. Maybe if we could tap into that and get some empathy, we might feel the urgency a little bit more, and we might not have waited until the last possible fucking second to wake up.
Well, we got to we got to vote. We have there's someone in the chat said, how do you get organized? First of all, volunteer. Get involved with the party and volunteer. Secondly, show up and help count votes. Be an election judge. Be someone who's involved in the system. How do you do it? You get involved. And
Move
Danielle,
to a swing state.
Yeah. And Danielle wanted to give you a shout out. When you asked that, I tweeted a couple of sources of mine at the White House. Here's what I got back, just the abbreviated version about, a war room. We aren't sitting idly by. We have the best minds discussing this inside and outside of the White House. So it sounds like they already do have a bit of a war room set up to discuss it. And hopefully that there, in the days to come, there will be more coming out of the White House once they pick an action that they can take. I think it's is your apartment bugged? I don't know. I know my phone probably is. I know this much.
What's that clicking sound?
When you talk about personal, look, I had to fight your uncle in court, Mary, 3 times. I won't have that opportunity if he's back in. They will simply yank my press pass, throw my ugly butt in jail, and drool while they do it. It's not. This is the game over. Game over. I can't say it enough. If you don't get involved, you're going to suffer. And everyone will say, we live in a technological Middle Ages where we're serfs, and there are people at the top in this oligarch environment who make all the decisions, have all the money, and they're having us pit ourselves against each other. Dude, you got to wake up. If you're sitting there and you're listening to this, wake up, register to vote, be involved, get involved even at the local level in your city and state government. You need to be out there, because if you're not involved now, this is the time when your country needs you. And if you leave it at rest, we will have a king, and you, my friends, will be serfs.
And I just, want to remind folks, Middle Ages, not a great fucking time. If you were not a white, cis, hetero, property-owning, pseudo-Christian man, it wasn't great. Today,
it wasn't great for them either,
Apple.
by the way.
Right.
It was terrible for everybody else.
So
yeah.
today was a terrible day for me to watch the first 20 minutes of The Handmaid's Tale, which I had sworn off and never watched. And then I watched the first 20 minutes and I had to turn it off. And I'm like, this is exactly why I never watched this.
Yeah.
Right. Because it was like, for those of you who have watched all fucking, seasons and are waiting the next one, I was like, oh, okay.
I'm living it. I don't need to watch it.
That's why I couldn't watch Succession, because it was like watching a documentary about my family. I'm like, I don't need to do that. Actually, it wasn't, because my family was really cheap and had bad taste. But other than that, anyway, yeah, it's like reality is there. We need escapism right now.
Yes,
we really do, which is why I really do think we need to have our non-apocalyptic book club at some point. But
oh, I'm in.
There's a new Inside Out movie, but I cried like a baby last time, so I'm not sure if I should watch it.
Avery and I walked out of the first one because we hated it so much. But
what?
I don't know. Anyway, let's stay on topic here. As Kyle keeps reminding us, this is a perfect storm of oligarchy and stomping on the working class and cruelty towards people who have any kind of economic or special needs. We saw this. I think COVID should have revealed to everybody what the agenda here was: just maximum cruelty, um, taking advantage of and making situations worse for most people, so the oligarchs could become richer. I mean, if we look at how much richer people like Bezos and Musk and Zuckerberg got during the pandemic, I mean, it's horrifying, right? But and the other thing that we should have taken note of is that the reason things were as bad as they were and never got better was because Donald Trump, the most insecure person on the planet who could never be wrong about anything, couldn't correct. So he used COVID not to unite all of us, which is really what we needed as we were terrified and alone in our homes, isolating and just absolutely afraid that somebody we loved was going to get us sick, or somebody we loved was going to get us sick. And that people are, I mean, thousands of people a day. Where I was in New York throughout the whole thing, but at the beginning we were hit really hard. Thousands of people just dropping dead. We had no idea what was going on. Instead of uniting us and pulling us together and say, we're all in this together. Our enemy is COVID, and we're going to fight it together, and we're going to find a solution. He made it us against them, and us was Republicans, and them was Democrats, and we've never recovered from that.
Us
ever.
were MAGA.
And that is the only reason. That is the only reason he's a viable candidate, because he has leveraged that division. If we're not divided, Donald can't survive, because he's so detestable and weak and pathetic. And I think we need to remind people of that. It's just amazing to me that it's like his record isn't even in the conversation anymore. He was in the Oval Office for 4 years, for God's sakes. It's not just President Biden who has a record that we can question. It's Donald Trump as well, right, Brian? I mean, I'm not insane here.
No, I was there. You're right. You're absolutely right. We've conveniently forgotten everything that Donald Trump did in the 4 years, and by God, he put us where we are now.
Yeah, it's like a modest proposal by Donald Trump.
Yeah. But,
if he could write, which he can.
You made an excellent point about it's confluence of events, but I think it's contrived. The Heritage Foundation for the last 25 years has tried to put these conservatives in. And they've worked hard to do it. And it started with Ronald Reagan defunding and tearing apart the press that gave us the press that we have today, confounded by actions taken by both Bushes as well and Donald Trump. This is a confluence of events. It was George Carlin said, you don't need to have a grand conspiracy where they sit in a room and decide things. They all belong to the same clubs. They all know what each other's interest is. And for 40 years, they have contrived this confluence of events to get where we are today. And the fact that we forget what Donald Trump did in those 4 years speaks to the effectiveness of their dastardly deeds over the last 40 years. If you can't remember what Donald Trump did to us in those 4 years he was in office and soiled and stained the office of the presidency, you are the one that's the mark. I refuse to go gentle into that night. Every time they say that Biden is a criminal, I'm going. We have a convicted felon running for president, folks. He's the criminal. He's the one that made a deal with Putin. He's the one who kissed Putin's butt. He's the one who tried to defund NATO. He's the one who wouldn't back Ukraine. He's the one that called his opponent called him a Palestinian, hinting that all Palestinians were part, as you said earlier, Mary, part of Hamas. Everything that Donald Trump does, and when he gets up, he always appeals to the worst angels of people.
Brian, he does it energetically and loudly. Come on.
Yes, he does, and with delusion of forethought. He is a maniac, and I'm tired of somebody coming up and telling us we're a third world nation. It's the worst it's ever been. No, it was worse under you, pal. It was worse.
I mean, yeah, of course it was. Of course. But he's got to continually try to convince himself that he's something he's not. So, I think Kyle mentioned that today he hasn't felt this bad since January 6th. I feel so much worse today than January 6th because
Well, I got threatened
on January
6th, but
6th,
right.
we did not yet know that the entire Republican Party was going to betray the United States of America and rally around the traitorous criminal, Donald Trump, who had killed hundreds of thousands of Americans and other horrific things. And we did not yet know that the Supreme Court of the United States was going to set the Constitution on fire. So, yeah, today feels worse because we have fallen so much farther in that time, despite the fact that President Biden has basically, I mean, you think about what this administration has accomplished, given what the hand it was dealt, and he gets no credit for it, and it's a 50-50 race. I mean, Jesus Christ, like, what is it going to take? What is it going to take? And that's one of the things that just makes my head explode because I don't know. Like, see, I just got rendered completely speechless, and it's incomprehensible, quite honestly. So I don't, Kyle, is that video or? Yeah, there we go. Look at this, guys.
Yeah, I saw that live.
Multiple capital injuries. Multiple capital injuries.
Yeah, I saw
mean,
that
it's
myself in person.
this
In fact,
is wild.
I have PTSD.
We need to. I think what we need to do with that video is stamp the words "official act" on it. and
Yes,
just, yeah,
do
and let's
that.
get that out tomorrow.
Question
or-
mark. Put a question mark at the end of it. So
No, because
No.
it
Official
was an official
Oh,
act.
okay.
Official
He's
act.
claiming it
because
was an
he's
official
gonna-
act.
And let's not forget, Donald
He
is-
already claimed it was an
Donald is
official act.
going to pardon those people who tried to kill our Capitol police officers, who tried to kill our congresspeople and their staffers, who tried to hang Mike Pence from a gallows, for Christ's sake. That's
Well, let me add something, Mary. He's now now he can charge for it though. Each pardon.
yeah, because it's an official act.
No, because they literally said
I know.
the
No.
pardon power. Right.
Right, because it's an official act.
Yeah, you're right.
Exactly.
So now he can make money off the pardons to fund his campaign.
Okay,
And
so
he
we have
will.
our work cut out for us. So the first thing we need to do is get that video with official act stamped on it out there because I mean that's God, I'm feeling like I'm gonna have an anxiety attack because seeing videos of January 6th, because I mean I'm sure like all of us, I remember exactly where I was and exactly what was happening and how the thing is like when it first happened, I was literally in an interview that had been planned beforehand and like I just had it wasn't really clear what was happening because nothing like this had ever happened before. I had no frame of reference. And somebody asked me, and like it was still like everybody was outside still. And so somebody asked me what I thought of it. And I was like, it's so Donald. It just looks so tawdry, right?
Well,
That's
and
the
he-
word
it
I
was
used
Donald.
because I didn't know. I didn't know yet. Like I just thought it was a protest with a bunch of idiots waving these ridiculous flags and being obscene and sore losers, right? I didn't know, there was no way to know yet what was going to happen. So now seeing videos like that,
Rudy
and-
Giuliani said trial by combat. I was standing there when he said it, and
Love being
Donald Trump
interrupted.
said, "Go
Love it.
up and take our capital back." And everyone that I'm
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, because it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So, I see videos like this, and it drives it home in a way it actually was not driven home, unless except for those of us who were actually there that day, because there was so much information we didn't have yet, and the idea that because of Donald Trump, because of the Republican Party, the American people have forgotten that. Like that's That's the tragedy. Because if they had not been allowed, and I blame you, Merrick Garland, for that as well, if they had not been allowed to forget that day, we would not be here now. And that is the truth. So what all of us need to do is regroup. I think, we've got the nerds tomorrow, but then honestly, I think we need to take a few days. July 4th is coming. I will be in mourning, but I will also be taking the day off. We need to take a beat. We need to take some time. We need to take care of ourselves. Last week was a very, very long week as well. The nerds worked like quadruple time, quintuple time, sextuple time. I don't know. We worked a lot last week. We've worked a lot this week so far. You guys are worth it. America's worth it. So we're happy to do it, but we're not doing anybody any favors if we burn out now. So let's take some time. Let's start thinking about, what we're going to do. Danielle, you're so right. Why people? I've been thinking this since Bush invaded Iraq. Sorry. Like, why aren't people in the streets? Like, what is going on? Like, what's happening? We need to get people. Let us be the people who get people in the streets. Let us figure that one out. And hopefully all of you are going to join us there. It's not going to be spontaneous. So let's plan it and let's make it big. And let's make it count and let's make it matter. Let's not wait until after the fact. That's not a criticism. Black Lives Matter protests were pivotal in American history. The I don't even remember what it's called, but the Women's March after the November election was pivotal, but both of those were after the fact. Let's not wait anymore. Let's not wait until after the election. Let's be agents of change. Let's try to affect something and let's do it right. And I'm hoping all of you watching us, who watch us, will spread the word, because it is absolutely down to all of us. Nobody is going to get us out of this mess except us. And that should give us some sense of agency and some sense of empowerment and some sense of hope. Jen.
And on that note, if you are going to a July 4th parade and you're waving a flag, maybe make your own sign that says no one is above the law. Or we fought this war to, it's not going to fit on a bumper sticker, but like, we are not, an empire. I don't know. But no one is above the law. Donald Trump isn't above the law. What happened to our independence? You guys you've got good ideas. There are parades everywhere on July 4th, everywhere. If you're going to show up to one, or just, read from Frederick Douglass,
yes,
whatever it takes, we need.
What to a slave is the 4th of July. I think about that every year, which is one of the reasons I'm not a huge fan of the holiday, and I'm certainly not a fan of it this year. Okay, so we're going to wrap up. Brian, any quick last words, because we've been here for a while and we do have a show tomorrow and we need to go to sleep.
United we stand, divided we fall is the motto of the state of Kentucky. Adopt it. Remember, join or die from the Revolutionary War. If you care about this country, come together for the things that we stand for and have fought for the last 250 years, and do not let the agents of chaos rule over the United States.
Perfect. Danielle?
We do not have time to be at each other's throats. I do not want to hear any more about Biden needing to step down. I do not want any energy wasted on bullshit. We have one threat. That threat is Donald Trump. It is MAGA. It is fascism. We have but a few months before our version of the Enablers Act is in the hands of Donald J. Trump. And the only thing that is standing in between that are we the people. So that's it. We're it.
Absolutely. Jen?
I cannot improve on anything any of you all said. So I might say, look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. for Morning Jen, and then at noon for the nerds. We are here for you. And then we are going to take the 4th, the 5th, the 6th. I don't know. I can't count. But then we'll be back.
Weekend.
We're taking a weekend, but we'll be back on Sunday after that.
Yes, that's right. So we will be back after tomorrow's programming. We will be back Sunday evening, but I will keep you all posted. But again, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate all of you. What a ride. So Brian, Danielle, Jen, thank you, my friends. I appreciate you. And I will see you soon tomorrow, 12 noon. In fact, in the meantime, please stay safe and be kind.